Hello there, my name is Linda Busick, and welcome to a special edition of Her Story. We have a lot of information to share with you that I hope you find interesting, so don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Hello there, my name is Linda Busick, and I am the Vice Chair of the Maryland Commission for Women. I also serve on the Executive Board of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center, and I'm also an elected official. I'm a County Commissioner for Worcester County Government. And I'm pleased to be with you today, and I welcome you to beautiful Ocean City, and we've got a wonderful spring day here. And remember, we're only a half a tank of gas away from your viewers in the Baltimore area, about 137 miles. And we want you to come on down and see us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Loretta GUBERNATIS and I became acquainted. And that is through the Maryland Women's Heritage Center and a program that we did in 2005 called Hats Off to Women. And that was done at the Pimlico Racetrack. It was a fundraiser to heighten awareness about our dreams for a Women's Heritage Center, focusing on the accomplishments of Maryland women. This is a museum and more. It will be a learning center as well as a place to archive information about our Maryland women. And I'm so pleased to announce that we do have a site, and it is 39 West Lexington Street in Baltimore. It's the old Baltimore Gas and Electric building, and we will probably open in the fall of 2009. Let's hope to see you there. Now, when Loretto and I were working on Hats Off to Women, we did a display about the many hats that women wear. Loretta learned that I had worn several different hats, one of them being as a Baltimore County police officer. I was a detective in the Baltimore County Police Department, and I was hired in 1971, and I retired in 1991, being the first woman to serve and complete 20 full years of service. And I worked in the fields of the juvenile unit, where I worked with runaway children, sexually abused children. I was then assigned to the rape homicide unit, and I worked with victims of domestic violence. I also investigated homicides, and I concluded my career in the Internal Affairs Division. And I have been happily retired since 1991, but I have been very active in my community, doing things that were related to my career as a law enforcement officer. Additionally, I also served on our dignitary protection team, and I was also trained in hostage negotiations. So I had a very well-rounded career with the police department, and I certainly did enjoy my tenure there. And upon retiring, my husband and I chose to move to the Eastern Shore, and we feel that this is one of the most beautiful places that a person could live. And I have become active with our Domestic Violence Prevention Coalition, our Child Fatality Review Board, our Citizens Review Board for Child Abuse and Child Neglect. We've just formulated a Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board, and I also serve on the Drug and Alcohol Council. So my police background has led me to additional community involvement as well. And through the course of working with domestic violence victims and being very active with women's groups, I began working with the Worcester County Commission for Women, and that led to my association with the Maryland Commission for Women. And we have a lot of programs to help the victims of domestic violence, and I'd kind of like to share a little bit of information about our programs that we're doing through the Maryland Commission for Women. Domestic violence is a very serious issue. It is a problem that concerns us not only here in Maryland, but across the nation. According to the Medical Association, more injuries are sustained by women 15 to 44 as a result of domestic violence than from automobile accidents, muggings, and rapes combined. In the years gone by, people did not involve themselves in helping victims of what we now call domestic violence. It was an issue that was meant to be kept behind closed doors, a family matter, something that people just didn't talk about. And it was viewed that that was a normal type of behavior. And even dating back to English common law, according to British common law, there was the rule of thumb, and that would be that a man had the right to beat his wife with a rod no thicker than the circumference of his thumb. And I am told that that law was actually on the books in Australia up until 1984. Thank heavens our legal system here in the United States has changed for the better, and we no longer have the rule of thumb. But when we talk about being a private matter, I have devoted the majority of my life to working and being an advocate for victims of domestic violence and their children, and children that have been victims of child abuse and child neglect. The reason I became a police officer is twofold. My husband, and we will be married 40 years this June, was a Baltimore County police officer, and he came home from work one night and he told me that the police department, after 25 years, had issued a personnel order recruiting women to be police women. And their assignment was to be either in the juvenile division or in the fugitive squad. And while I had not thought about becoming a law enforcement officer, I surely knew that there was a need for that. And I filled out the application, and out of over 100 women that applied, myself and another young lady were two that entered the police academy in 1991. 1 year later, the other young lady left the service of the department, but I did remain, and I completed a 20-year of service and had a very worthwhile career, I think. It was very fulfilling for me. And there are young people that I worked with from the time that they were 8, 9 years old that still keep in contact with me today. They felt as though I knew something about their life that only perhaps their parent or parents knew. And I still get phone calls today to share their joys and their sadness. So I certainly did enjoy the time that I worked for the police department. The second reason, and perhaps the most compelling, is that my mother was a victim of domestic violence. And I grew up in Baltimore County. I grew up in Towson. And my mother had been beaten and had gone to the police station to request a warrant to be served upon my father. Upon going to the police station, she was met by a young officer who observed her injuries and said, "What did you do that made your husband do that to you?" Well, my mother had not done anything to deserve being beaten. And this young officer, and let's just call him Joe, was very flippant and wasn't very respectful, and sent my mother on her way, and no action was taken against my father. It so happened that this officer knew him. And I always remembered that. And my knowledge about law enforcement was limited to what I saw on television. And there was a wonderful program called Dragnet. And Joe Friday was a good cop, and he was a professional cop. And he would never, ever treat a woman in such a fashion. And I knew that there were good officers and bad officers, or not as professional as they should be. And when I met my husband, I was reluctant to even date a policeman, but I found that he was truly a compassionate person, and we ended up getting married. And he encouraged me. He said, we need women on the police department, particularly to work with victims of domestic violence, victims of child abuse, etc. And so that led to my fulfilling something that I felt was needed. When I graduated from the police academy, I happened to run into Joe, who was still working at the police station. And I asked him if he knew who I was, and he said, obviously, you just graduated from the police academy. I said, well, I'm more than that. I'm a child who observed someone being told they deserve to be beaten, and I'm here to see that that never happens to another woman who comes to this police station and asks for help. So you see, my personal experience has led to my involvement in trying to seek out opportunities to aid women and help the children who are also very much affected by abuse. And in serving as the vice chair of the Maryland Commission for Women, this year I am pleased to announce we have done 2 projects with Verizon Wireless, and one of them is called the Hope Line Project. And that is a project where we are encouraging citizens across the state of Maryland, organizations, women's commissions, any type of service organization that would like to partner with the Commission for Women. Go to www.marylandwomen.org and check the link for the Hope Line Project. And what that is that Verizon Wireless provides cell phones, not used ones, but new ones, to victims who have gone into shelter because of incidents of domestic violence. They are given a cell phone to use for an extended period of time while they're in crisis. And that allows them to call the police if they're continually being stalked, to call their attorney, to make appointments for job interviews, etc. Another part of the Hope Line Project, besides offering phones to victims in shelters, is to also provide some training, some educational programs, such as the Invest in Yourself program. And the Maryland Commission for Women did this type of seminar here in Worcester County in 2008. And it was actually done at Warwick Community College. And it was an all-day seminar, and it covered everything from financial literacy, working with a budget, to how to write a resume, what to expect during a job interview, women's health and fitness. And I'd like to share a little bit about that program with you. We have a memory album, and it shows that we had over 104 women. Over 50% came from area shelters. It was open to the public, and it was an empowerment seminar for women for whatever reason. And no one knew anyone's station in life. There was no indication that we're reaching out to victims of domestic violence, but that was certainly our intent. And we even provided child daycare so that if a person wanted to attend and they had a small child, that we offered daycare and we offered a wonderful lunch. So this is one of the seminars funded by the Verizon Wireless Company and the Hope Line program. And if your viewing audience would like to help in preventing domestic violence and helping their area shelters, you know, this is a very tough economic time. and we're not asking for monetary contributions. But if you happen to have a used cell phone laying around the house, it's in your way. If you throw it in the trash, it would be wasteful to put it in a dump, and also the batteries need to be disposed of properly. So there's a wonderful way that you can get rid of a used cell phone and help victims of domestic violence and your local shelters. This fall, we kicked off the Hope Line cell phone recycling program at the House of Ruth, and you may go to the website www.marylandwomen.org and call also the Maryland Commission for Women and ask for a drop-off site where you might take these phones. And we can also provide your group or organization with a Hope Line cell phone collection box. And all you do is fill it, write down the number of phones that your group has collected, let the Women's Commission know how many have been donated, call a phone number, and the box will actually be picked up at your address. So it's very, very easy. And what happens is this: the more phones that are collected, it shows Verizon Wireless that people are interested in supporting their community and their shelters, and they in turn sell these phones or refurbish them to outside markets. The value of the phone is not as important as Verizon's contribution to our local shelters. And often they will give each one of the local shelters that we recommend funding in grants that may be $2,000, they may be even more. So it's very important that we engage people across the state of Maryland to start collecting their used cell phones. Let the Women's Commission know where you are. If you want someone to come out and talk about the program, we can also arrange to do that. But you can help put an end to domestic violence, and Verizon Wireless will be more than glad to take these cell phones and contribute back to the community. So I thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about Verizon's cell phone project. Now, another thing that the Maryland Commission for Women is doing is they're working with the Department of Human Resources on a program called 1,000 by 10. And what that means is that we need to create 1,000 new foster care homes by 2010, because we've lost that amount of foster care homes over the period of the last 10 years. So we're encouraging people to contact our Department of Human Resources or their local social services agency and ask how they might be involved in becoming a foster parent. Now, in our county, in Worcester County, we have 17 foster homes, but we're in need of 12 more. In Baltimore City, they have over 1,300 foster homes, and they need 600 more. So it's all not just a problem here in Worcester County, it's all over the state, and the amount of homes needed is shown in a little graphic that I'll refer to. While at our Hats Off to Women event, Loretto was introduced to a very special person, a good friend of mine, and a very outstanding law enforcement officer, Chief Bernadette Tapino. And Bernadette was a Baltimore County police officer when I knew her many years ago, and she has become the chief of police here in Ocean City, Maryland. And this year, she is the chair of the Maryland Chiefs of Police Association. So we're very proud of her here. As you know, March has been designated as National Women's History Month. The theme for this year's Women's History Project is Women Taking the Lead to Save the Planet. And we have honored 5 Maryland women from all different fields across the state of Maryland. And I'm very pleased to say that Ilya Fair, who was recognized posthumously, was the honoree selected from Worcester County for her involvement with the environment and making sure that Assateague Island remained a state park and not a housing development. We had other fantastic women like Brigadier General Allison Solomon, Dr. Diane Griffin, Harriet Legum, and another posthumous honoree, Anne St. Clair Wright. Now, I mentioned previously that I serve as a Worcester County Commissioner, and I was elected in 2006 to the Northern District. And Worcester County is divided into 7 districts. The Northern District comprises part of Ocean Pines, Shell, and Bishopville. We also have the Ocean City District, the Cinnapuxon District, which is West Ocean City. We have Snow Hill, and we also have Pocomoke. I am very much involved in environmentalism, making sure that we keep our environment clean, that we control our growth. I am also an advocate for making sure that we offer as many services as possible to our elderly and our underserved, and particularly our children. And we will be working on a new dental clinic here in Worcester County, and that's one of the projects that I hope to see through fruition. Through the next year, we should be starting on that project, and it's a totally unique experience for me, and I'm really enjoying what it is that I do, and that I have an opportunity to serve the people. Domestic violence knows no barriers. It can happen to anyone, could be male, could be female, race, color, creed. It makes no difference. Your status in life, whether you're very well-to-do or whether you come from minimal economic means. This is the most underreported crime. Many, many times, statistics have shown us that women do not report domestic violence until approximately 8 times they have sustained abuse. And many, many times the victims do not report the violence because it's an issue of power and control and of isolation. And perhaps the victim has no family. I know in my mother's case, she was from the South. Her family lived many hundreds of miles away with no support from friends or family, no place to go, and no real substantial income, and needing the income of the spouse. There are many reasons why women don't report abuse. And I say women because it's predominantly women that are the victims, but it could be a male that has sustained abuse. And perhaps men do not report being victimized because of being embarrassed to say they were assaulted by a woman. But whatever the reason, it is a serious problem. And I referred to some statistics. Over 19,000 people were the victim of abuse in the state of Maryland in 2007. Over 970 were from our Tri-County area, which is Worcester, Wycomico, and Somerset County. And here in Worcester County, approximately 392 were victims of abuse, domestic violence. And some of those were people who have come here on vacation, but the majority are the people who live here year-round. So no matter how beautiful the place, no matter that it's a resort, domestic violence occurs everywhere. And it should be everybody's business, not kept behind closed doors. Victims need to know that there's a support system out there for them, whether it would be a friend or their clergy or the Department of Social Services. They need to know that there are resources out there where they can get some training and educational opportunities where they can remove themselves and be independent. And they need to know that there are safe havens that they can go to, such as the House of Ruth or local shelters or safe houses. So I encourage anyone who feels as though they have been victimized to seek out help from someone that you trust. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you've enjoyed the special segment and have become more enlightened about the Maryland Women's Heritage Center and the Maryland Commission for Women and supporting domestic violence prevention. Well, that's it for her story. We all know his story, and now it's our story. Bye-bye. See you next time.
My name's Dwight Busick. I'm a retired Baltimore County Police Captain, and I'm lucky enough to be Linda's husband. And the reason Linda went on the police department is because I suggested it to her, because I knew that we needed women in the police department to help with victims of domestic violence and children that had been abused, and the places where a woman is needed to make the victim of crime more comfortable. So that's why I asked Linda to join. At that point, there were only 3 women in the police department, and we needed more. And as a police officer at that time, on the street, dealing with these kind of issues, I knew that men weren't doing the kind of jobs that were needed to be done. And the only way we could solve that problem is bring more women onto the force. And I think that through the years, now that after Linda joined the department, several years later, then they started to put women on the street as police officers in the cars. And I think that it's done nothing but improve police agencies throughout the United States. Some men said that they, or I think some men knew that they feared that they didn't think women could do the job. But we know now that women do a better job in many situations than men do. And I think that's important. It makes a police department more professional and a better place for our citizens. When Linda came on, was probably the first time that Baltimore County ever had 2 police officers, a male and a female, husband and wife, together in the police department. And for several years after Linda had started out, we would literally wave at each other as she left for work and I came home, or vice versa. It didn't bother our marriage. I thought it made it stronger. I think in some cases we're luckier than most people because we got to discuss and have something in common with our jobs, and that is the ability to help people and fight crime. In June, we'll be married 40 years. And it's been a great 40 years because we've had an opportunity to work together and share a career that is important to us. Just want to thank you for letting me talk about my wife because I don't have that opportunity very often. Thank you.